Hello everyone, my name is Felipe and in this video I will summarize the results of an experiment presented as a poster presentation at the Time Research Forum 3 held in Lisbon in October 2023. Intentional binding effect is the experience of temporal interval compression between voluntary actions and subsequent events when the latter are perceived to be caused on purpose by the actions. Experimental evidence suggests that this effect might be modulated by the emotional valence of the consequence, in that a stronger subjective compression occurs for positive than for negative consequences. However, studies fail to fully reproduce this effect. In this experiment, we aim to search for the affective modulation of the intentional binding effect with a 2AFC task and linguistic stimuli as emotional stimuli. We use 180 emotional words, nouns, in Brazilian Portuguese to select 60 negative, 60 positive, and 60 neutral matched words matched by concreteness, frequency, and word length. Familiarity and age of acquisition values were later captured with 23 native Brazilian Portuguese speakers. The main experiment, 32 participants enrolled in doing it. There were three main factors: an agency factor with active and passive conditions, an emotional valence factor with neutral, positive, and negative emotional words blocked by emotions. That meaning that participants only saw neutral, then positive, then negative words. And finally, a reference interval variation factor, in which the second interval could be or -2, -1, 0, 1, or 2, g and this different than the first interval, g and this being the just noticeable difference. In each sequence, participants had to judge which of both intervals was shorter, with a total of 360 trials. Interval 1 was random between 200 and 300 milliseconds, and interval 2, the reference interval, was a fraction of the first, as explained before. Participants went through an adaptive staircase procedure at the start of the experiment to estimate their individual G and D for temporal discrimination in non-agency sequences. We obtained as results with a GLMM, meaning a generalized linear mixed model analysis, indicating that the slope of the psychometric function was significantly positive. That is good because it showed that volunteers properly understood the task. For the same interval ratios, as we can see in the difference between the curves in the graphic in the left, the first interval was judged as shorter more often in the agency condition, the blue line, in comparison with the passive condition, which is consistent with the intentional binding effect. Finally, there were no effect of emotional intentional binding, indicating no affective modulation. As we can see in the graphic on the left, the three curves which represented the emotions had no difference between them. This experiment successfully replicated the intentional binding effect using the 2AFC task with word stimuli, indicating an underestimation of time interval when participants were agents in comparison with when they passively heard a sound. Additionally, the number of times the first interval was used as being shorter than the second as a function of the reason of intervals, confirming participants' understanding of the task. However, the study did not find evidence of affective modulation of intentional binding, indicating no differences in the effect of emotional balance within agency conditions. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you have further questions or comments, I invite you to check my poster on ResearchGate and contact me.